The Galileo 7. This is episode 33.
You're listening to 70s Trek with Bob Turner and Kelly Casto, the fan podcast that looks at Star Trek in the 1970s. It was the decade that built a franchise.
Shaggy and Scooby had the Mystery Machine. Debbie, Mark, and Tinker had Speed Buggy.
Speed Buggy.
Julie McCoy had the Pacific Princess.
Love Boat.
Love Boat. And for one episode, Mr. Spock had the Galileo 7. I'm Bob Turner.
And I'm Kelly Casto. This week we climb aboard the Galileo 7. She's nearly as iconic as the Enterprise herself, and we take a look at her history, her demise, and her resurrection.
Before we do that, let me tell you how to reach out to us. Just visit facebook.com/70s Trek. There you can leave us a comment or ask a question of Kelly. And yes, we'll even get back to you.
You can also send us an email to 70strek@gmail.com or go to iTunes to find the show. Just search 70s Trek in the podcast section. Hey, while you're there, we hope you'll leave us a rating and a review. That just makes it easier for others to find the show.
Everybody remembers it. It is a classic moment from the episode The Enemy Within. The transporters are down. Sulu and his team is stranded on the freezing surface of Alpha 177. And the Galileo 7 comes out.
No.
It comes out of nowhere. It streaks out of the heavens to rescue him and his crew.
No, that never happened.
It comes down in the. What do you mean it never happened?
No, the Galileo didn't rescue Sulu and the Enemy Within.
What? Why not?
Because there wasn't a Galileo 7 yet.
Huh?
They hadn't built it yet.
Well, oh, okay. I guess we better talk about that then.
That's a good idea. so let's talk about the Galileo 7. And actually, before we do that, let me just step back just a second and talk about early sci-fi shows. Ooh. So you look at all the early pre-Star Trek shows, you don't see shuttlecraft. You see ships that actually land on the planet.
Oh, that's right. You do. Like in the 50s stuff?
Yeah. Forbidden Planet.
They're all...
We talked about that.
We talked about that one. There was, I think it's called... rocket ship XM, I think it's called, and the rocket lands vertically on the moon. Right.
So Gene's original premise, though, was that he stated that the Starship Enterprise rarely lands. And we know, given the special effects complexity, landing a giant spaceship each week, that went from rarely to really never.
Production costs.
Right.
Costs too much money to show that.
Exactly. So what did they implement instead?
The transporter.
The transporter, right. Darn thing. That's why Sulu couldn't get off the planet. So anyway, quickly in the first season, it became necessary to introduce a shuttle. Right? So what happens?
Well, they have that hangar bay, and I think in The Conscience of the King,
yes,
he's kind of courting the hot blonde who was nuts.
Yes, Lenore.
That's a whole nother episode. Hot blondes that are nuts in Star Trek. Anyway, so he's courting the hot blonde that's really nuts, and they're looking down at the shuttle bay.
Right.
So at some point, you're right. We got to see some shuttlecraft.
Got to see some shuttlecraft. So that's where AMT comes in, and they offer to build a shuttle in trade for the model rights.
AMT, the model builder, the model kit builder.
Right. And so AMT, they turned to their speed and custom shop head designer and builder, Gene Winfield, Now, what is it with Star Trek and being associated with people named Gene? Just saying.
Nice.
Yeah.
I don't know, but you're right. That's kind of weird, isn't it?
Right.
I think I've gone my whole life and in person never met another Gene. But you're right. Here in this production, there's 3.
There's 3. So Matt Jeffries actually did the original shuttle design, but when he handed them to Gene Winfield, and to back up, Jeffries' designs were beautiful, sleek, elegant, nice, smooth lines, or no lines. It was all curved.
You're talking about the one with the curved nose.
Yeah.
And the almost wing-like, we'll call them wings for lack of a better word, but they were like in a W shape, weren't they?
Yes.
Very cool designs.
Very cool designs. He gives the design to Gene Winfield, and he goes, I can't build this in 30 days, which was the time frame they gave him. And I'm sure that, cost was a factor as well. Winfield took Jeffries' designs and did his own proposal, his own designs, handed them to Jeffries, and Jeffries approved it. Now, Winfield's designs were very much more straight-lined, kind of, if you will, boxy.
I think Jeffries did like a, I don't want to call it a tug, but like a worker bee craft that was sort of like what Winfield ended up coming up with. Is that right?
It was kind of like like employee shuttle, if you will, to get people from, quickly from point A to point B.
So in a way, it was Jeffries' design, but it was really Winfield's design.
Yeah, Jeffries had the basis. Winfield made it practical.
There you go.
The design was a steel structure with a wood finishing on the sides.
Was it plywood?
It was all plywood. Yeah.
Okay.
24 feet long and weighed about a ton. Kind of some interesting facts. You see on the shuttle, the back, there's like a foot in the middle of the very back of the shuttle.
Right.
That is from an aircraft company, and they provided that foot. The nacelle tubes were from a well drilling company.
Oh, wow.
And they painted it just like you'd paint a car. They primed it, they sanded it, they painted it with, car paint. Proof colored and everything.
That's why. Okay. Because, when you say plywood, I think of plywood, that you go to Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever and buy. And that stuff's rough. So they primed it. They put something on it to give it a steel-like surface and then painted it.
Yep. Just like a car.
See, I don't know. I don't know anything about that. I'm glad they did.
Yeah. Well, so they didn't do a lot of, they being the Speed and Custom Shop and Gene, they didn't do a lot of the lights and everything. They left that up to the studio. And one kind of neat thing is the door. You know how the door kind of goes up and slides apart?
Mm-hmm. And then a little bridge falls down?
Yeah. He did the actual framing of that, but the studio did the pulleys and everything to make that door actually work.
Oh, cool.
So they put the finishing touches on that, the dash, if you will, the control panel on the inside, and we'll talk about that in a second, but also the nacelle lights and that kind of thing. Now, as part of the agreement, as I just alluded to, they had to create an interior set of the shuttle. So
they created really 2 things. You're saying.
Yeah.
So they created the physical big box like shuttlecraft, the life-size shuttlecraft, but then they also created interior sets?
Yes. Oh. Just really one set. And what they did is they created these things called wild walls. And as you know, if you're shooting, you can't be in this enclosed space. So the walls would, roll away basically so you could get whatever shot you needed. Without that wall obstructing the view of the camera, obviously. Now, there is also no ceiling on this set. they had what they called a vertical ceiling, and it was basically the ceiling, but where the ceiling would start, it just kept going vertical, and it was painted like it was a ceiling, and that was for lights.
You'll see that a lot on like sitcom sets.
Yes.
That are done in front of a live audience. Rather than a ceiling, they do the vertical thing. And if you kind of really focus on it during the show, you'll notice, oh, wait, there's crown molding, but then it goes straight up.
Right.
Yeah.
Kind of weird, but visually that works for shooting a show, I guess.
Yep.
He also, Winfield also created the chairs. So there's 7 chairs in the shuttle, and he created those chairs with an aluminum base, and even had aluminum knobs that he custom created for the incline of the seat.
Those chairs are so interesting. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the styling, and he did a great job matching the styling inside the Enterprise itself and matching the interior set of the Galileo, but they're so impractical.
Yeah.
There's no, from mid-back up, there's nothing there. You could imagine these guys having broken backs all the time.
Oh, yeah. You'd need some kind. There was not even seatbelts.
Right.
So the size. The full-size model was, and you see shots of like Spock standing at the door, and his head obviously goes above the top of the shuttle.
Oh yeah, when Spock gets in, he's got to lower his head.
Exactly. Now, when you go and look at the interior set that they built, he has a little bit of headroom yet. So it's a little unproportional, but it, probably works for shooting, I guess.
Right.
I'm going to go to the TV shows in a second, or the Galileo 7, talk about how it played out in the different episodes. But first, I want to talk about Winfield just a little bit more. He had a couple other contributions to the show. Did you know that?
No, I had no idea. No, please tell me.
So in Bread and Circuses, he loaned the studio a car that he designed. He called the Reactor. Now, the car is the Jupiter 8.
Oh, really?
In the show.
I always loved that. So that was his car.
That was his car. He designed it and built it. And even after they shot it, Shatner did like a promo shot in front of it with his uniform on.
I think I've seen that.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. He also built the Matt Jeffries designed D7 class battle cruiser, the Klingon battle cruiser / Romulan. The studio had budget constraints, so Jeffries designed this kind of home on the side and worked with Winfield and folks at AMT to actually create the master tooling model of this.
Just like they did the Enterprise, right? Probably a
Right.
30-inch model, which they would use after that for the dies and the tools and all that.
Right, exactly. And they usually, like the master tooling models, were larger than the models that you buy in the kits, right? But they took one of the models. They built a couple of them. They took one of them for use on the show. So it was first seen as the Romulan battle cruiser in the Enterprise incident.
How about that too? I mean, and we have talked about this, I think, in a past episode, but
Yeah.
as a kid growing up in the 70s, because you watched these all the time, sometimes out of order, you just you would see the Klingon battle cruiser and go, yeah, that's the Klingon battle cruiser. But it's fascinating to sit here in 2017 and you're telling me actually that ship never appeared until the 3rd season.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yep. All right. So let's talk about the show. We first see the Galileo in Galileo 7, the obviously that was kind of like its christening, if you will.
It got its own show.
Got its own show. Exactly. There was also another shuttle in that episode, 17012, which was the Columbus. You saw that in the shuttle bay.
Okay.
So I'm just going to go through wherever there was a shuttle, really.
Okay, go ahead.
Now, in Galileo 7, we know the Galileo 7 was destroyed, right? But it appears several other times as Galileo 7.
Mm-hmm.
The Menagerie had, I'm going to do this out of order.
That was a shuttle base, wasn't it? A shuttle base shuttlecraft?
That was a starbase shuttlecraft.
Okay.
So SB 11-12011, Starbase 2. And Kirk and Commodore Mendez were riding in that trying to catch up to the Enterprise, and Spock wouldn't let them. Decker takes the shuttlecraft NCC 17016, which is Einstein, and he takes that into the Doomsday Machine. Metamorphosis.
Right.
The companion brings Kirk, Spock, McCoy, and Governor, whatever her name is, sorry, can't remember, to the planet.
Commissioner Hedford, right?
Hedford, yes.
I just pulled that one out.
Yeah, good one. Now, that was the Galileo, NCC 17017. So just kind of scratch your head there.
Well, somebody just forgot to paint the 2 on it. Maybe it just got back aboard the Enterprise.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm spinning here. Keep going.
The immunity syndrome. Again, this is season 2. Spock takes a shuttle into the amoeba, and it's still the Galileo.
They loved the name.
They love the name. Now, in The Way to Eden, the hipsters, they steal the Galileo 2. So now we finally see the Galileo 2, which is a nod to Galileo 7 episode where it gets destroyed. Couple, you mentioned The Conscience of the King, where they talk about the shuttle bay. There's another reference to shuttlecraft, and I thought this was interesting, the Omega Glory. They reference that the Constitution class was Enterprise and the Exeter. Mm-hmm. They could hold 4 shuttlecraft. That's kind of in the show what I could dig up about shuttlecrafts and everything. One other side note, and then I'll kind of wrap up my section here. The term shuttle was a concept that really Star Trek was one of the first to use.
Really?
Yes. NASA had ideas of it. There were also several other go around, but the term shuttle, Star Trek was one of the first to use it, and it actually inspired the NASA space program to name their program the Space Shuttle program.
So you're saying that NASA kind of got the name from Star Trek?
Yes.
That's awesome.
And Nixon, I think, officially announced it in '69 or something like that.
Wow, that's pretty neat.
Yep. Now, so last thing, AMT. Got to go back to AMT, because they made this happen. Really, they released the Galileo 7 model in 1974, and it sold millions. So, Bob, did you have one?
I did. I did have one.
Did you?
It was awesome. Yeah, it was about, I'm guessing here because it's been a few years, but my guess is it's about 6 or 7 inches long. What was really cool about it, though, was it separated. So the top part would come away. So that's the side walls and the top would come off. And the little chairs were in there. And, I think I used to grab little green army guys and stick inside.
That's cool. That's so cool.
Yeah. I mean, it was a ball. And do you remember the animated series? There was the Aqua Shuttle. So,
yes.
Being the geek that I was, I would just take the top off of it and pretend it was the Aqua Shuttle too. So Good
cool.
times. You know, you mentioned The Way to Eden, the third season episode. The guest star, one of the big name guest stars in that is Charles Napier. I don't even know why I'm going down this road, but I just thought I'd bring it up. He passed away in 2011, but Star Trek was like his third or fourth. 1, 2, 3, 4. It was his fifth acting job as a young man. He went on to have an incredible career, and if you go out to IMDb, you'll see who it is. Everybody, I guarantee you, everybody. You might not recognize his name, but you will recognize his face when you see it. He's had a career playing the heavy, the badass, the hard ass, the guy who kind of gets in your face and tells you how it really is, chomping on a cigar or pointing his finger at you. He's made a career of being these tough as nails, gritty kind of character. And then you go back to Star Trek and he's the guy singing that silly song.
Yes.
What does that have to do with the Galileo? Nothing. Except he was in the Shuttlecraft too.
A nod to him.
That's the nod to him. He was a heck of an actor. I always enjoyed him because when I realized who he was later in life, oh my God, it's him. I loved seeing him, and he was in so much. He's got so many credits on IMDb. What a prolific actor he was. So let's talk about the shuttle or the Galileo after Star Trek went off the air. It has got a weird, convoluted history. You know, the Enterprise model was very quickly donated to the Smithsonian. And so it more or less was in the hands of people who were watching it and taking care of it. Now, it always didn't get the care it needed, but it did go through a few restorations when it needed it, and all's good there. That didn't happen with the Galileo. After the show went off the air, Paramount donated it. That when we're talking about the exterior mock-up now, the prop, not the set. Paramount donated that, and we'll call it the Galileo from here on, to the Braille Institute of Los Angeles. And it sat outside that building, and children played with it. They played on it, they played with it, they got inside, pretended they were in space. Can you imagine growing up and having that to play with?
I know.
That would have been awesome.
Oh my gosh.
But at some point, it was considered kind of unsafe. And so it was put up for sale. And Roger Heisman, and he was a man from Palos Verdes, California. That's near Long Beach. He bought it, and he bought it for his son to play with. He kept the shuttle outside of his house in the driveway for years.
You're kidding.
And he lived in a development. So here's the shuttle from Star Trek, unprotected in his driveway, and it's slowly degrading. You know, there's a very famous picture of it. You know how if you leave something outside that's wood and leaves begin to fall on it and stuff from trees falls on it and that organic matter begins to stain it, you know, you get that kind of cruddy green, black staining. It's got it. It's on the Galileo. And I'm sure, you know, after a while, you're driving to work every day looking at that thing beginning to turn gray and gross. And you're like, get this out of the yard.
Right.
Well, that's exactly what happened. The neighbors got together, and they got a petition together, and they wanted Heisman to get that thing out of there.
They got a petition to get
They got a petition to have it removed.
Oh, my gosh.
So he had to sell it. So that's when a man by the name of Stephen Haskins stepped up, and he bought the shuttle. He invested about $8,500 to have it restored. This is in the early 80s. Took a couple of years to get it restored, but it was seen in 1986 at the California Creation Convention during Star Trek's 20th anniversary. And there are pictures of it. So it's been restored. It's there. It looks great. And you kind of think, well, this is the end of the story of the Galileo. It was found and restored, and it's all good. No. No, that was just chapter 1. So here's what I don't really understand is this guy, Haskins, when it was not being shown at a convention, he stored it outside in the open, unprotected, exposed to the elements. Why did you pay $8,500 to fix the thing up if you were going to store it outside?
Oh my gosh.
Can you believe that? So between 86 and 89, the Galileo was restored 2 more times because he kept storing it outside and it kept degrading and deteriorating. So by 89, it has had 3 restorations already. But ultimately, it was allowed to deteriorate to the point where he could no longer invest money in it. So it was found... This breaks my heart to say it. It was found in a lot underneath an LA overpass with old buses and recreational vehicles rotting, deteriorating. If you go to StarTrek.com, there is an article from 2011. In that article, you'll see a photo, and it is jaw-dropping, and it breaks your heart if you're a fan of the show. To see the Galileo 7 sitting in this lot, dilapidated. Unbelievable. But I think Haskins ran out of money, and he didn't know what to do. What's really weird is, apparently at some point, somebody had hauled this thing around and had put sand in it. It was filled with sand at one point. I don't know why. It was really, really in bad shape. He had spent a lot of money to get the thing fixed up over the years. And then for it to come to this, it seems bizarre to me. So the story takes another turn in 1989 when a woman from Akron, Lynn Miller, steps up and she buys it for $3,000. She has it moved from Los Angeles to Northeast Ohio to Akron. And her goal is to get it fixed up and to get it into the Smithsonian. God bless you, Lynn Miller. She's got great intentions and she's got the right purpose here.
So, and from the restoration she was trying to do, and what I saw in an interview with Gene Winfield, is that she contacted him.
Yes.
Are you going to go over that?
A bit.
Okay.
A little bit. Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to go in great detail there. If you want to jump in, you can. I was just going to say that she did. She was trying to get from him, hey, how did you put it together? What's the best way for us to restore it? And she did get some of that information from him. She got a team together. She was part of a Star Trek fan club called the USS LaGrange. And so from the USS LaGrange, several people from that group decided, yes, we will help you, Lynn Miller. We will help you restore it. And some of them were woodworkers. Some of them kind of knew what they were doing. But they're doing it with very, very little funds. So what she began to do was when there was a convention in the Cleveland area, she would haul the shuttle to that convention, display it, and try to raise money. Hey, we've got the shuttle. We care about it. We're trying to get it restored. Could you please donate some money? And she was able to raise money, and over time, the restoration was going on, but it was taking a long time and costing a lot. The Galileo was actually being stored in a hangar at the Akron-Canton Airport. You know what's really weird, and I just have to say this. Kelly and I are originally from Northeast Ohio.
Yep.
Kelly, if you knew the damn shuttle was just 40 minutes away from where we lived, would you have gone to see it and maybe even helped?
Oh, yeah. I'm shaking my head.
I know.
My gosh.
Where we grew up, it wasn't very far away. Akron was very close. I would have gone there on the weekends.
Oh, yeah. Well, you would have drugged me along.
Yeah, you darn right I would have. Now, so it sounds like things are progressing at a snail's pace, but they're progressing. This is where the story kind of gets really sad. Some of the members of the restoration team, they have a falling out with Lynn Miller. One of the guys from USS LaGrange and who was also on the team, his name was, I think it still is, Tim Gillespie. I don't think he changed his name. And he wrote this online. He said, Lynn was a very difficult person to deal with. And when the inevitable problems arose, and they did, I didn't want any fingers pointing at the chapter. Whatever happened to the Galileo was completely the responsibility of Lynn Miller. So it sounds like she had put up the money to buy it. There were some disagreements. Probably the restoration team said, "Oh, we've had enough. We're going to walk."
Yeah.
So the Galileo was left in disrepair. It had been stripped down. It had been sanded to begin the restoration work that never happened. And then the hangar at the airport was sold. And now there's not a home for the Galileo. So Lynn Miller is searching for a place to not only store it, but to find some people to begin restoration work on it again. She found a sandblasting company in Akron. I don't know what this company did besides sandblasting. I guess they wouldn't be my first choice for fixing the Galileo up. But I don't know the people involved. But she moved the shuttle to the sandblasting company in Akron, and saying that, hey, we want to get this work done. I think I'm gonna raise some money and then I'll be back. And the owner, after a time, the owner began to reach out to her and couldn't get her on the phone. And in fact, he never heard from her again. And this went on year after year. And he moved the Galileo out into his storage yard outside. It's outside again. But this time it's not L.A., where for the most part it's sunny. Now it's in northeast Ohio, where there's lake effect rain, sleet, snow, and hot and humid summers. It's not a good place to store anything made out of wood outside. And it sat there for 5 years. I know. It just brings a tear to my eye thinking about this.
It hurts.
It does. So this had to be like 1998 or 1999. A Star Trek fan is at this business and stumbles across it in the yard. It's like, is that what I think it is? And he tries to begin to get people interested. Hey, look, I found it. I can't believe I found it. We have to do something about it. We have to save it. I think he was associated with some of the people at the USS LaGrange Star Trek Club, tried to get them back involved. But apparently there were so many things wrong with it, and it was going to require so much money that they couldn't even get it started.
Jeez.
I know. You know what's really wild is, and again, that article at StarTrek.com, there are photos of this thing from the air sitting in the yard. There are two of them. It's clearly the Galileo because you can tell by the shape.
Right.
Sitting in the sandblasting company's yard outside. Amazing that they even found these photographs, number one. Amazing that it's there, number two. So as the small group of fans, they're trying to figure out what to do. The sandblasting company closed its doors. It's like the hangar being sold all over again. The storage yard around the building then was cleared because they wanted to sell the property. And the Galileo disappeared. People that were interested in it didn't know where it went.
Oh, my.
Yes. So this is around the early 2000s. It's gone off the radar. People in the know that were trying to follow it and figure out, a way to save it, all of a sudden, it's gone. It's like it evaporated into air. A lot of people thought when they cleared the yard, they just destroyed it. That was sort of the prevailing thought. And in that 2011 article on StarTrek.com, it even says that, one guy even says that I think it's probably been destroyed. So as late as 2011, nobody knows where the Galileo is. Here's Gillespie. Here's something he wrote online. If this thing has been hauled around from location to location and left outside for any length of time without proper storage, it's just not going to hold up. You have to remember that it was a prop meant to be used on a soundstage and then discarded. It wasn't built to withstand California windstorms and Ohio winters. The guys did their best, did the best they could, rather, under difficult conditions, but God only knows what's happened to it in the last 13 years. Oh, my God, doesn't that bring a tear to your eye?
No, it's sad.
I know how much such an iconic piece of Trek history means to many out there, but actually owning this white elephant, if it exists, would be a huge, major undertaking, a veritable money pit, if you will. So as late as 2011, it's a mystery. Nobody knows where the hell it is. And then all of a sudden, it shows up. A couple by the name of Adam and Leslie Schneider come into the picture now. They have been quietly looking for the Galileo. And they do what a lot of people weren't able to do. They actually track down Lynn Miller. And it turns out that she actually went to the yard and saved the shuttlecraft before everything else was moved out.
Wow.
I know. So the Schneiders were able to purchase the Galileo. And they did what Lynn Miller did 10 or 13 years prior. Well, actually, probably more like 20. They went to Gene Whitfield. And they said, hey, look, we know you built it. We want to have it restored. We're wondering if you can help us with that. Can you tell us how to do it, or what's the best plan to do it? From there, they contacted a company in New Jersey called Master Shipwrights. Master Shipwrights, and this is ingenious, they are restorers of classic wooden boats. Oh. And so they have it shipped, the Galileo, to New Jersey, and the folks at Master Shipwrights begin an 8-month restoration process. This is in 2012. And they took her completely apart, removed everything, right down to the steel frame. And then they rebuilt her with all new materials. They kept the nacelles. They kept the landing gear. Pretty much everything else was rebuilt.
And the frame.
And the frame. Right, and the frame, right. In fact, there's a really incredible video on YouTube that follows the restoration, and we'll put the link up on our Facebook page. It's about 17 minutes long, but I watched it and I was mesmerized by it. And you'll see this. It's so sad. This broken down hulk. It's stained. You can see where it's been sanded. It's kind of different colors in places.
Pieces missing from it.
Pieces missing. Yep. And then through the course of this video, you'll see the restoration. She's stripped down, taken down to her bones, if you will, and then built back up. And by the end, she looks beautiful. Beautiful. The man who was in charge of the restoration is one of the few remaining wooden boat craftsmen left in the United States. And I just wanted to give him a shout out. I just wanted to give him a shout out. His name is Hans Mikadis. And, from us here on 70s Trek, thank you.
Thanks, Hans.
Thank you for the work you did on the Galileo. When the restoration was complete, the Galileo was moved to the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. And it's on display there in the museum. So, finally, after this incredible odyssey, she's being taken care of the way she should be. But can you believe that story?
Incredible.
It's nuts.
It is.
Here's what's nuts about it. I get it. In 1970, who wants this old piece of junk from a canceled TV show? I get that. But after it was purchased and restored and looking good in 1986, how do you let it go again? That's what I don't get. Star Trek's a big deal in 1986.
Yes.
Star Trek Forward come out, plans for the next generation, were going on. Star Trek's a big deal. How does the shuttle then go down this other path to where
store it indoors?
Yes.
Oh my.
That was a rant.
And I'm just sad that we didn't know about it when I was in Akron.
Isn't that the truth? Would have been there every weekend.
Exactly.
On our next episode, we will talk with a man who worked on every version of Star Trek from 1990 to 2005. And he was very involved with Trek fandom in the 1970s as well.
Yep, Doug Drexler will be joining us right here on 70s Trek next week. See you then.
Thanks for listening to 70s Trek, an independent fan production. Join us next week as we explore more about the production, the actors, the producers, and the influencers of Star Trek in the lost decade of the 1970s on 70s Trek.